So, we've heard a lot about the national debt and the debt ceiling. And here to help us understand a little bit about what that is our Director of Senate Relations, RJ. So, could you kind of break this issue down and tell us what is the debt ceiling that we are hearing so much about?
Yeah, thank you, Thad, for having me. Happy to be here. The debt ceiling is just simply the maximum amount of money that the federal government is allowed to borrow to finance all of its various expenditures. So, anything, mostly we fund things that the federal government spends money on, from defense to Social Security through taxes, through revenue. But when when expenditures, things that the federal government spends money on, exceed our revenue, we have to fund them through debt. And so mostly that's in the form of the Treasury selling Treasury bonds to everyone from Americans to foreign nationals, and so that's the debt that is held by the public. Is the federal government actually owes money to somebody who holds a treasury bond. And so it's not like we're just printing money. There's an actual debt obligation there in order to fund the spending that the federal government does.
So, in 2000, the national debt was $5 trillion. But just this year, we've seen the national debt skyrocket to $31 trillion. How did this happen? Can you tell us a little bit about the history about this?
Yeah, absolutely. So the short answer is spending. We have Washington has an out of control spending problem. Most companies, most families, they operate on the assumption that they're not going to spend more money than they have, and essentially, ever since 2000, the federal government has not operated in that way. They've been spending more money than they've been taking in revenue. And so a really striking example of that is, as you said, the federal debt in 2000 was around $5 trillion. Well, just since March of 2020, with the onset of the COVID pandemic, the federal debt has increased by $7 trillion. So wow. In the country's entire history up until 2000, we'd accumulated $5 trillion worth of debt. We fought 2 world wars in that time. We won the Cold War in that time. And all of that, we accumulated $5 trillion worth of debt. And in the past, roughly 2.5 years, we accumulated 140% of that just in 2.5 years. So there's no question that Washington has an out of control spending problem that has to be addressed. And until we do that, you're not going to see a reduction in the debt, and we're going to have to keep increasing the debt limit to pay for all the things that we can't afford.
So you touched on something about increasing the national debt. How does that translate to the inflation that we've seen over the past several years?
Yeah, there's 2 important points here. One is that that's exactly right. Federal debt is spending money that we don't have, and so you're injecting all of this cash into the economy, and so you have inflation is more more dollars chasing fewer goods, which makes the price of those goods more expensive. And so when we're spending all of this money, yeah, you're absolutely driving up inflation. The second point is that it's this vicious circle. So right now, I'm sure most folks are aware that the Federal Reserve has massively increased interest rates for the first time in a long time. And in order to combat the inflation that we're seeing, which has largely been caused by out of control federal spending, well, in order to pay now off that debt that out of control spending has caused us to incur, we have to now pay to borrow that money at much higher interest rates because the Federal Reserve has raised interest rates. And so just over the past, the interest rates that we've seen over the past year and a half or so have actually added $2.5 trillion in projected debt over the next 10 years, just because interest rates are higher and it's going to cost us more money to borrow money to pay for the money that we've already spent. Right? It's a completely nonsensical way to run a budget process.
Thank you, RJ, for breaking that down. Stay tuned. We're going to be covering the different issue areas of the national debt and how it affects Americans and what the politics are behind this issue that we see of Washington spending.